They asked me to speak this morning. It's an honor to be up here. They normally keep me locked away with the students, but I'm going to have a great time. I'm excited to be here. Happy 4th of July weekend. No, you could clap for that. Like, go America, right? I'm wearing my red, white, and blue striped shirt. I feel like a superhero up here. I wasn't going to talk about it, but I thought, I don't know, any of your neighbors like mine? Like, I think my neighbors spent like $72,000 on fireworks this year. Like, they're still going, like, they're going off, yeah, right? Like, where do they get the money for this? And why do they keep shooting them when I'm trying to sleep? It's kind of rude. This morning, I wanted to start off talking about the MCU. Where are the fans of the MCU? Where are you at? All right, I thought maybe there'd be a couple of you in here. Well, that's awkward. Maybe you don't know what it is. Let's start over. The Marvel Cinematic Universe. Are you any fans of that in here? You know, the Avengers? Yeah, make some noise. There was a new movie released. In fact, it's the final one in this current story arc this week, Spider-Man Far From Home. I haven't gone to see it yet. If you've seen it, don't spoil it. I want to go see it. But I'm a fan of the MCU, but it didn't start out that way. See, when the Avengers first came out, it's like 11 years ago. And if you look at this Marvel Cinematic Universe, what's amazing about it is it's like, I think it's the single greatest story or history of movies ever put on film. They've taken this story arc, this huge story arc. It's lasted over a decade. There's 23 total films, and they all weave and blend into each other. And it's pretty amazing. When they first came out, though, I wasn't really a fan. I didn't get connected to it. See, I consider myself, I'm like a fan of Batman. Any Batman fans in here? Why are we talking about this in church? There's a spiritual point. I'm going to make it. Trust me. So I was like a fan of Batman, and like Batman was my guy, and I kind of vibed with him because, you know, he's this wealthy guy. I'm not. He was this wealthy guy, and like he used his money to, you know, create weapons and this alter ego, this vigilante. They would go out, and he didn't have any particular superpowers. He was just a guy who was trying to make things better, and I think that kind of resonated with me. And so I kind of avoided the Avengers because they're from that other studio, and I didn't want, like I couldn't cross over. I felt like, no, I have to throw all of my allegiance into one. I can't be fans of multiple superheroes. But I had a very good friend of mine who's like a Marvel super fan. Like he was always about it, and he's all, no, Matt, you really got to go see Captain America, the first event. Like, start with one, and if you don't like one, like, I'll stop bugging you about it. And he kept on, and I said, no, I'm Batman, I can't. I'm not really Batman, like, I just like watching Batman. So he said, maybe I am. He said, no, you have to go see it. So I finally relented. I said, all right, okay. If I watch it on Netflix, will you kind of leave me alone about this? So I sat down, and I watched Captain America, the First Avenger. And I was hooked, right? You guys know what I'm talking about. Like, you get through it, and at the end, there's always those advanced trailers for the next movie. You go, oh, now I got to watch that one too. And like, I sat down and I spent a weekend just binge watching like 14 movies. And I'm like, no, family, leave me alone. I'm watching the Avengers right now. I can't be like I'm watching these superhero movies. And I'm thinking about it, well, what is it about the Avengers? What is it about these series of movies that's captivated us as a nation so much? Because like I look at what's going on in the box office right now, and there's generally two veins of thought. There's the remake. They're redoing everything that's already been done. And then there's superheroes. I saw a meme online this week. It was classic. It had a picture of a movie marquee and the names of the movies that were showing in the movie theater. And then underneath it said, the 90s called. They want their movies back. It's like on the marquee was Men in Black, Toy Story, The Lion King. It's like, am I in like an alternate universe? What's going on right now? So there's the remake. And then there's superhero movies. And I think like superhero movies draw us in because there's a little bit of something for everyone, regardless of where you are, regardless of your age or, you know, sophistication and what you like in a movie. Like you can go to a superhero movie and like if you're into like, you know, moral dilemmas, like there's good character development, like there's always a dilemma for the good guy. Are they really all good or maybe they're partly bad? There's like action and adventure, like things are blowing up. It's like my neighborhood on the 4th of July. There's like the Marvel ones, they incorporate comedy into it. Like maybe if, you know, you like looking at good-looking people, there's usually a bunch of those too. And so like there's something for everything. But I think the common thread through all of them that draws us in is the superpowers, right? Right? Like I watch these movies and on some level I think all of us at some point in time watch these superheroes and as they're doing things and you go, man, I wish I could do that. All right, let's play a game, all right? I'm a youth pastor. We play games. This is an audience participation thing, so please follow along or I'm just going to look silly up here. Here's what we do. I'm going to mention something. If you agree with it, raise your hand. Like, just raise your hand. If you don't agree, don't boo or anything. That'd be rude. Just raise your hand if you agree. So raise your hand if you have ever wished you had the ability to fly. Like almost every hand in here. Like, I remember when I was little, like, I wanted to fly. I don't know what that is, but it's like flying. Like superhero, like, I feel like I want to fly. Like, man, that'd be so cool if I could. But when I was little, the only flying I did was like over the handlebars, and that usually ended bad. But I wish you could fly like most people do. Like, how cool would it be if you could just take off and fly? Raise your hand if you've ever wished you could climb up the side of a skyscraper and then like sling a web and go flying through the city. Raise your hand. All right, a couple Spider-Man fans. Okay. Raise your hand if you ever wished you could turn into like a menacing, muscle-bound freak. Just, right? Like, there's a couple of you who are already there. Like, I saw him walking and like lay off the gym. Like, you've gone too far. Right? Like, I'm just jealous because, like, I go to the gym and I could work out for 24/7 and I'm just this scrawny, weak guy. And then it's okay. I'm just jealous of you. Raise your hand if you ever wish you could travel through time. Yeah. Like, where would you go? Like, go down where would you go? Where would you drop in? Who would you see? What would you want to watch happen? Like, for me, like, I'm kind of a weirdo with superheroes. Like, I think more, like, practical. Like, if I could have a superhero, like a superpower, raise your hand if you're with me. If I could pick any superpower, I would probably pick the ability to, like, point at something and it would clean itself. Where are my people at, right? Like, oh, the dishes, oh, they're clean. No, the bathroom. I don't know why that's the bathroom, but... And I'd be like Captain Cleano, right? And I'd have a sidekick, he'd be Garden Boy. And like, he would have the ability to like shrink weeds till they die and like grow the trees huge and like cut the grass just by moving his hand. Like that, like that's my fantasy. Some of you guys go, we already have that. It's called children, right? See, I think there's something in these movies, like we all sit back and at some point in time, there's some ability that we wish we had, that we could do something spectacular. And like we would use that to rise above like this regular life that we're living in this regular world. And we do something that's beyond ourselves. Have you ever thought, like, if God came to you and he said, I'll give you whatever you ask for. Like, what would you ask for? Like, where would you go with that? What would be the deepest desire, the cry of your heart? It's like, God, I want to... Before we go too far down that rabbit hole, let me just say, it's highly unlikely that God's going to come to any of us and make that offer. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm just saying, like, God's God. He can do what he wants. I'm just saying it's unlikely. But there was one man in history where God came to him and he made that offer. And we can find his story in the book of 1 Kings in the Old Testament. It's the story of a guy named Solomon. And God came to Solomon in a dream, and let's look at that. It's found in 1 Kings 3:5. It says, that night, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream, and God said, what do you want? Ask and I'll give it to you. Now, you need to have a little background on Solomon, who he was. Solomon was the son of David. David had been the king of Israel. David's passed away, and now Solomon has become the king. And he's a fairly new king. I think maybe he doesn't know everything there is to know about being the king and the politics and all of it that's involved. And so God comes to him and says, Solomon, ask for anything, and I'll give it to you. Like, put yourself in his shoes. We find Solomon's response a couple chapters later. He replies to God. He says, now, O Lord my God, you have made me king instead of my father David, but I'm like a little child who doesn't know his way around. That's a great language. He says, and here I am in the midst of your own chosen people, a nation so great and numerous that they cannot be counted. Give me an understanding heart, so that I can govern your people well and know the difference between right and wrong. God came to Solomon and he said, what do you want? All you got to do is ask for it, and I'm going to give it to you. Solomon could have asked for fame. He could have asked for fortune. He could have asked for wealth beyond imagination. He could have asked that his nation be the most powerful one that the world had ever seen. But he didn't ask for any of those things. See, Solomon recognized where he was and his current situation, and with a humble heart, he came to God and he says, God, just give me an understanding heart so that I can govern your people and know the difference between right and wrong. Another way to say that is he was asking for wisdom. Solomon went on to be widely known as the wisest man who ever lived. God gave him wisdom because he knew where Solomon's heart was. But on top of that, because he didn't ask for fame, fortune, wealth, and all that, God gave him those things too. But he was known for being the wisest man that ever lived. And later in his life, towards the end of his life, he wrote most of a book called Proverbs. It's also in the Old Testament. And he wrote this book of Proverbs, and it's a collection of sayings or advice that he was giving. We believe it was written probably for his sons. So here's the wisest man that ever lived, nearing the end of his life, and he's telling his kids, this is what's important. Like when I'm gone, this is what I want you to remember. These are the things to hang on to when I'm gone. And if you step through the book of Proverbs like I did this week, you'll find that he mentions the word wisdom 31 times. And that doesn't count the number of times he said the word wise. A wise man this, or if you're wise, you will do. So he, numerous times, time after time after time, throughout this book that he's leaving to his boys saying, this is what's important. The theme of the book, the message he's trying to send is wisdom. He wants you to be wise. And if the wisest man that ever lived thought this was important, then it should probably be important to us too. And that leads us to where we are in our trip through the book of James. If you brought your Bibles with you this morning, open up to James chapter 3. We're going to start at verse 13. And in this chapter, and what we're going to look at today, James is talking about and showing us two different versions of wisdom. And he starts off with this one. Nope, go back to the other one. It says wisdom. Nope, go back. We're way ahead. There we are. If you are wise and understand God's ways, prove it by living an honorable life, doing good works with the humility that comes from heaven. James starts off talking about, he gives an example of true godly wisdom. And if you have godly wisdom, he says, this is what it looks like. It's you're living an honorable life full of good works with humility that comes from God. This is what wisdom is. This is what he's setting the table and saying. But I think before we go much further in talking about wisdom, I think we have to understand what wisdom is and what the definition of it is, and understand that there's different ways to look at wisdom. Not everybody views wisdom the same. I went on and I looked at the online dictionary's definition of wisdom. You guys already saw it. Here it is again. Online Dictionary defines wisdom as the quality of having experience, knowledge, and good judgment. So this definition is saying that if I have experience doing something or knowledge about something, I can make good decisions based on my judgment, and that makes me wise. Okay, that's a good place to start. But does that definition of wisdom line up with a biblical definition of wisdom? See, to answer that question, I think we need to take a step even further back and look at who James was writing this book to. See, the book of James was written by James, the brother of Jesus. It's one of the oldest books in our New Testament. It was written around 50 A.D. And James was writing his book. It wasn't a book at all. It was actually a letter to a Jewish audience. These were early followers of Jesus who were Jewish. And they would have understood wisdom based on the Old Testament definition of it, and not our modern or Western version of wisdom that we see here. See, our Western version of wisdom comes from kind of Greek origins, where it's based in education and philosophy. The Greeks prided themselves on those things. In fact, if you take that word philosophy and you break it down to its root core words, there's two words that make up that word. The first one being philo, which is defined as loving. The second one, Sophia, which means wisdom. So philosophy literally means the love of wisdom. But when they're talking about wisdom, they're looking at it from their Greek standpoint, that it's based on education, experience, knowledge, and ability to make good judgment. It's different than what the readers of James' letter would have understood wisdom to be. See, they would have been following the Old Testament knowledge of wisdom, and it's found, Solomon talks about it in his book, Proverbs 9:10, and he says, fear of the Lord is the foundation of wisdom. Knowledge of the Holy One results in good judgment. He's saying, look, throw out everything you think you know about wisdom, and the foundation of wisdom is found in the fear of the Lord. Knowledge of the Holy One, knowledge of God results in good judgment. So because of this, I think they would have had a different understanding when James is talking about wisdom. They would have known that wisdom is applying godly knowledge. And because of that, I think it contrasts wildly to this Greek belief of what wisdom is. And it's not what they would have recognized it as. James goes on and he paints another picture of a different kind of wisdom. He says, but if you are bitterly jealous and there's selfish ambition in your heart, don't cover up the truth with boasting and lying. For jealousy and selfishness are not God's kind of wisdom. Such things are earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. For wherever there is jealousy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and evil of every kind. See, we look at this and we call this worldly or earthly wisdom, and it's not hard to see it in our society right now. See, our society, too often I think we listen to the voices that tell us you need to keep up with the Joneses. We listen to them say, you need to get what you can because nobody's going to look after you, so you got to get what you can while you're here. We listen to those voices that say, we should constantly be seeking more. More possessions, more power, more influence, more money, more. There's voices that say, this is all there is, so get as much as you can and hang on to it as tight as you can. And use your knowledge and experience to leverage the circumstances so that they play out in your favor, regardless of who gets in the way. Friends, let me tell you, this isn't true wisdom. Because true wisdom is revealed by actions and attitudes that honor God. If you're taking notes, circle, highlight, underline that one. True wisdom is revealed by actions and attitudes that honor God. See, it all starts with Him. It's not about what I can get. It's not about what I have. It's not about grabbing as much as I can. Maybe you've heard a saying, it's the root, money is the root of all evil. And I mean, that's close. That's a paraphrase from a Bible verse found in 1 Timothy 6:10. It says, the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. See, wisdom, kind of like faith, is a heart thing. So where's your heart? Is the deepest desire of your heart found in the things of this world that are temporary? Or are they found in the things of God? Is your heart rooted in the things and the people that matter to God? This is the message that he's telling us. But he also goes on to say that, look, there's consequences to earthly wisdom. And he lays out what they are. He says, first of all, there's disorder and evil of all kinds. That word disorder, you could also call it chaos. And it doesn't take much. You look out on the society that we live in, and you see disorder and chaos kind of reigns. It's a world that says everything you know is right is actually wrong, and everything you know is wrong is actually right. It tells you that you have to stake your side, pick a stance, and that there is no common ground, that if you believe something different than somebody else believes, that they're the enemy, and that you have to hate them. There is no middle ground anymore. There is no compromise anymore. There's no civil discourse anymore. And he says that it creates evil of every kind. And if you watch or listen to the news or get it on the internet or maybe old school newspaper, Evil is flooding our society. What do we do? As followers of Jesus, how do we respond? Thankfully, James doesn't leave us here. He goes on, and he says, but the wisdom from above is first of all pure. It's also peace-loving, gentle at all times, and willing to yield to others. It's full of mercy and the fruit of good deeds. It shows no favoritism. It's always sincere. And those who are peacemakers will plant seeds of peace and reap a harvest of righteousness. You want to know if you're living with godly wisdom? Here's your checklist. This is how you do your gut check, and we're going to go through these in a minute. And if you're taking notes, like silently as we step through each one of these, like assess where you're living and how you're living your life and go, oh, man, this is the one I really need to work on. And we're going to talk about how you do that when we get to the end. The first one he talks about is pure. And this isn't talking about like sexual purity. This is talking about a wisdom that's refined. It's focused on one thing and one thing only, and that's doing whatever God has called us to do. And here at Washington Heights Church, we exist for the sole purpose of helping people meet and follow Jesus. And we do that by loving God and loving other people. What has God put you here to do? Are you laser locked on that? Do you go through each one of your waking days thinking, what's my point and purpose of today? Am I living towards it? Second point is peace-loving. See, godly wisdom puts a high value on easing conflict. How different would our society be if those of us who are followers of Jesus went out into the marketplace of ideas and said, look, we don't have to agree on everything, but let's talk about the things that bring us together instead of driving a wedge between us. I believe there's enough of us that we could change the course of our society and we can make it a much better place to be in if we all live by this point of godly wisdom. Next is gentle. And this is a wisdom that's considerate. It's a gentle strength, but it doesn't show up to fight. Like it comes, it shows up and it wants to serve. Like I want to use the gifts, talents, and abilities that God has given me to serve other people, whether they believe what I believe or not, whether they're walking the same walk I am or not, because by doing so, I can be a physical representation of the God that I profess to believe. I just want to serve other people, to keep myself laser locked on the point of why I'm here. He goes on to say it's willing to yield to others. As we go through, trying to serve other people, trying to do what God put us here to do, it's like we can get this idea in our head that I've got to do it my way, like I know how I want it done. And this idea says godly wisdom is reasonable or submissive. Like it doesn't have to be my way or the highway. It's listening to other people's point of view and maybe doing it someone else's way. Because at the end of the day, as long as we're driving towards the ultimate goal, it doesn't matter if it's done my way or someone else's way. Setting my pride aside and saying, no, we can do it that way too. He says it's full of mercy. And mercy is forgiveness that's given towards someone who deserves punishment. And this one is probably one of the hardest ones for me, and maybe it is for you too, because there's times in my life where I look at the situation and I go, you know what? I want to hang on to my hurt. I want to hang on to my anger. I want to hang on to the pain that I'm feeling right now against someone else because, you know what? They deserve to be punished for what they did. And this point he's saying, look, you need to forgive other people like you've been forgiven. You need to freely give it, and that can be a stumbling block to us because it means giving up our right to be angry, mad, or hurt. Next point he says is it's full of good deeds. See, godly wisdom is full of all the good things that flow from living this way. Like if we were able to hit every one of these points, like the good deeds that flow from our life just by doing this, like we could change our world, and we do it for people's eternity. Like, why are we here? What should we be working towards? And if we're doing those things, it's going to bear good fruit. He goes on to say that it shows no favoritism. This is a wisdom that's applied the same regardless of who's involved. Saying it doesn't matter if they're rich or poor. It doesn't matter if they're strong or weak. It doesn't matter if they're old or young. It doesn't matter if they're Republican or Democrat. It doesn't matter if they're black or white. It doesn't matter if they're American or something else. He says it sees them on an even playing field. We don't apply favorites. If we did that, we could change the world. And lastly, he says it's always sincere. This is wisdom that's true. Like, it's heartfelt. It's honest. Like, if the deepest desire of your heart is to see the things of God matter to the people around you, man, that's what we should be striving for. And you go, okay, Matt, I got that list, but like, how do I get that kind of wisdom? Like, maybe I'm trying to do it on your own. Maybe you're trying to hit those points in some way or another, and you go, man, I fall short time and time again. Well, James tells us how we can get that kind of wisdom. Earlier in his book, in James 1, chapter 5, he says, if you need wisdom, ask our generous God, and he will give it to you. He won't rebuke you for asking, but when you ask him, be sure that your faith is in God alone. Do not waver, for a person with divided loyalty is as unsettled as a wave of the sea that's blown and tossed by the wind. He's saying, look, if you want that kind of wisdom, ask him for it. If you come with true and sincere intentions, it's the cry of your heart, God, I want to live with the kind of wisdom that James is describing here. He says he will give it to you, but you have to be sure that you're asking and you're sure what you want from God, and then don't waver from it. Otherwise, you'll be like a wave tossed in the sea. Because it's not by anything we do. It's not because of us that we can live a life and change the world. It's because of everything that he's done. It's because we continue to put our faith and hope in him and him alone. And he will give you wisdom. I'm going to close up with one more passage from Solomon back in the book of Proverbs, because I think he sums up this whole thought pretty well. He says, my child, listen to what I say and treasure my commands. Tune your ear to wisdom and concentrate on understanding. Cry out for insight and ask for understanding. He says, search for them as you would for silver. Seek them like hidden treasures. Then you will understand what it means to fear the Lord, and you will gain knowledge of God. For the Lord grants wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He grants a treasure of common sense to the honest. He's a shield to those who walk with integrity. He guards the path of the just and protects those who are faithful to him. He says, then you'll understand what is right, just, and fair, and you'll find the right way to go. For wisdom will enter your heart, and knowledge will fill you with joy. Wise choices will watch over you, and understanding will keep you safe. You want to live with godly wisdom, ask him for it. Believe he's going to give it to you. And then let him fill you with the joy that his true knowledge will bring. Will you pray with me? Heavenly Father, Lord God, we come before you this morning. We acknowledge that you're the Lord and giver of life. You're the creator of all things. Everything exists because your hand has made it. God, this morning we come before you and we just bow down and give you all the praise and glory. God, we ask that you would fill us with your wisdom. Let us be a people that have a heart for you, and that it's displayed by everything we do, that as we leave these doors and go back to our homes, communities, that we would live lives that are radically different from the people that are around us. And God, not for our glory, but that it would bring you glory, that by living differently, it would draw other people to us that would want to know what's so different about the way we live. And God, that would draw more and more people to you. God, I thank you for this time and this place. I thank you for your word. I love you, and I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. You guys, thanks for coming. You guys have a great week, and we'll see you next Sunday.